Story 1. Being struck by lightning. One moment, fine. Next moment, there are white-hot needles poking into every pore of my skin. Then darkness. Story 2. My intrauterine device had entered the lining of my uterus, and my gynecologist told me to go to the emergency room. The emergency room doctor removed it without warning or consent. A piece of my uterine wall was removed with it. This was the first and only time I have passed out from pain, and I have passed several kidney stones. The emergency room doctor told me I was overreacting. I filed a complaint, had my medical bills paid, and received a written apology. Story 3. When I was about 14, I got a really bad sunburn on my back and shoulders, like 2nd degree. My back had blisters all over it. A few days later, at a party, I got into a scuffle and ended up on my back on a cement driveway. Police were called to the party. I definitely should have received an underage drinking charge, but as soon as the officers saw my back, they called an ambulance. The emergency room doctor said I needed to go to a burn unit. Unfortunately, my parents had no insurance. After a conversation I was not part of, the doctor came back in and gave me a shot in the buttocks. 15 minutes later, the doctor put on a rubber glove and started peeling the skin off my back. I do not recommend that experience. Story 4. Chemical burn on my cornea. Have you ever seen those contact lens cases with the platinum disc on the bottom? The idea is it neutralizes the hydrogen peroxide into a mild solution overnight. I was staying at a friend's house the night before a high school cross-country event across the state. He knocked over my case, where it lay on its side for most of the evening. He woke up before me and set the container back upright without mentioning it. I put in my lenses and went on about my day. My vision got a little blurry throughout the day, but no pain. That's not out of the ordinary. Usually, a few eye drops clear it up. Fast forward to later that night. I tried to remove the lenses, and they were now stuck to my eyes. I struggled to get them off. The next morning, I could not see anything. I saw blurry shadows at best. The pain was excruciating. I've never felt anything like this to date. After being heavily sedated and a series of steroids, my vision returned. Safe to say, I wear glasses now. Summary. Knocked over my contact lens case and was legally blind for 5 days. Story 5. Tooth pain is always at the top for me. It will literally make you want to harm yourself. Nothing else matters. Nothing stops the lightning strikes of pain. You can't focus, your blood pressure goes up, and you lie in a fetal position crying until it is fixed. Story 6. Kidney stones multiple over a couple of days were very painful. They made labor and birth seem easy in comparison. Story 7. Fell nuts first from 5 feet up onto a climbing buckle hanging from a rope. Walked it off. You know when a man does not make a sound and just walks, he is feeling it. Story 8. It's kind of embarrassing, but I have chronic constipation. Most of the time, I don't really feel pain, but there are rare days about once every 7 months when the pain is excruciating. It is not like a sharp pain you get from stubbing your toe. It is a dull, constant pain in your stomach that never leaves, making it difficult to sleep. You also feel uncomfortable, nauseous. I vomited 3 times that day, walking hurts, and mentally it takes a toll on you. I basically did not feel like myself, but just a puddle of pain that couldn't move and felt hopeless. However, now I am under the care of a nutritionist, and I have not experienced those days since. Story 9. I stepped on a severely rusted nail that nearly went completely through my foot. Removing it was extremely painful. Story 10. Hysterosalpingogram. They inject dye into your fallopian tubes to check for blockages. They advise you to take ibuprofen as if it is just another period cramp. That was not a period cramp. Story 11. I survived a car accident that should have killed or paralyzed me about 15 years ago. I was coming to a stop on a highway due to heavy traffic. The car behind me did not try to stop, so I was going about 10 to 15 miles per hour while the car behind me hit me doing 60 to 65 miles per hour. I should have been crushed into the steering wheel while the airbag deployed and, at minimum, received severe whiplash, but most likely had a severe spinal injury or death from crushing. Instead, miraculously, my seat broke. While I was thrown forward, the instant I hit the car in front of me and whipped backward, The seat whipped all the way back and I was lying prone. The airbag did deploy, pushing me back into the seat as it whipped back. My spine and head were cradled. However, the car behind me hit me so hard my Jeep's back end went up into the air and I rolled forward onto the car in front of me. While I was prone and upside down, face forward looking down, the steering column was pushed forward. Instead of hitting my face, it was pushed into my chest. Emergency crews arrived and extracted me from the vehicle. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital and had 2 surgeries on my leg, which had a compound fracture. The worst pain was from 7 breaks in 6 ribs. Most were hairline fractures, but still extremely painful. They gave me oxycodone for pain, but I wanted to stop using it as soon as possible. The doctor said the new opioids were non-addictive, but my mother has a doctorate in pharmacology, so I knew that was false. I spent another month in severe pain as my ribs healed. Luckily, the driver of the car I was forced into, and the driver and passenger of the car in front of him who were also involved, all walked away from the accident with minor bruises and scratches. The driver who hit me was conscious when police and firefighters arrived and told the police he had a seizure. My insurance agent thought he had been coached to say that. Idaho has a law stating that if you cause a car accident due to an undiagnosed seizure disorder, you are not liable. The hospital took blood samples when he arrived. He was more injured than I was, and they put him in a medically induced coma for almost 2 months. Once his coma was reversed, the police questioned him, a warrant was issued for the blood samples, and the hospital handed over the test results. He had been high on methamphetamine when he crashed into me. I was healed from the rib breaks and in a walking cast before I received my insurance settlement because his insurance company delayed and wasted everyone's time. I still miss that Jeep. Story 12. I have broken 43 bones and had 76 staples and stitches. I have had both my gallbladder and appendix removed. I have had kidney stones twice. I even cut off a finger and had it reattached, followed by 2 surgeries on the same finger to fix issues. They all hurt a great deal. But this past January, I got shingles along my hairline on my left side. The blisters hurt and itch. There are no painkillers that help because it is nerve pain. Opiates do nothing. When I got a blister atop an optic nerve on my head and touched that nerve, it caused the most intense pain to travel around my head into my eyeball. For 30 to 45 straight seconds, it felt like my eyeball was on fire, very literally. All I could do was put my face into a pillow and yell at the top of my lungs, begging any and every deity to make it stop. I endured that 5 or more times per day for nearly 2 weeks. The case of shingles I had caused nerve damage that I am still dealing with. One man on the shingles subreddit shared that he got shingles on his face a few years ago. It affected his eye. He experienced what I felt for 30 to 45 seconds constantly. The pain was so unbearable that they had to put him into a coma for over a month. Because nerve pain is so intense with no relief, it is the worst type of pain you can endure. Far worse than a cut, broken bone, or even cutting a bone in half. Story 13. Kidney stone. It seems like nothing at the start and then it hits. You feel like vomiting, you want to fall unconscious, and you cannot. There is not a single position that will alleviate the pain. Nothing helps apart from the blessed morphine. Story 14. Oh my gods. Yesterday I had the worst cluster headache of my life. It made me shake, vomit, and claw at my eye to try to release some of the pressure. It lasted 24 hours. I could not eat, drink, or sleep. Taking medication caused vomiting. I had to wither in bed. My husband took the day off to watch our daughter. I gave birth unmedicated to an 8-pound baby. I tore 3 ways. I would much rather give birth again than go through that migraine. Usually, I would rather give birth than go through a cluster headache worse than an 8. I do not recommend cluster migraines. They are called suicide headaches for a reason. Story 15. The worst physical pain I have ever experienced was when I herniated a disc in my lower back. It was so severe that it pressed on my sciatic nerve and caused some irreparable damage. I had been doing physical training for a few months that wasn't helping. I was in so much pain just standing, sitting, or doing anything outside of bed that I would start sweating. One night, I woke up at 2 a.m. with severe back pain. I had taken a muscle relaxer around 8 p.m. to help me fall asleep, so I should have still felt its effects. By 4 a.m., I was in such intense agony for hours and could do nothing to stop it. Around 4:45 a.m., after tossing and turning in pain, something popped. A wave of pain surged and then suddenly stopped. I fell asleep within minutes and woke up 6 hours later feeling somewhat normal. That was 2.5 years ago, and I haven't had any back pain since. I still have numbness in my right leg where the sciatic nerve was damaged, from the middle of my buttock down to my ankle, and occasionally experience pins and needles in the bottom of my foot. Story 16. I have been kicked by a horse, breaking my ribs, burnt, shot, but nothing was more painful than a broken heart. Story 17. I had really bad plantar warts on my feet when I was around 12 years old. No matter how they treated them, they never went away, and for every wart they removed, 3 more would appear like a hydra. Eventually, they decided to biopsy one, the largest one in the center of my heel. They injected something into my foot that was supposed to numb it so I wouldn't feel anything. It didn't work. It was 30 minutes of knives and various tools digging into my heel, and I felt every bit of it. I must have screamed loudly. It turned out the wart was rooted much deeper in my heel than they initially thought, which meant they had to dig deeper than intended. Once they started the process, they couldn't stop halfway. They finally removed it. The good news is that once they did, many of the smaller ones died off and eventually the warts went away entirely. I have broken my arms 4 times, and that was nothing compared to that biopsy. Story 18. For me, other than childbirth, the worst pain would be any kind of dental pain, such as dry socket or a tooth infection. It is the most sensitive and severe pain. You cannot breathe, swallow, talk, or eat. The throbbing, heat, and pain are excruciating. No wonder Tom Hanks took the ice skate to his tooth. Anything to get it out. Story 19. Sneezing the day after open heart surgery is difficult. And then there is losing my beloved dog 2 years ago tomorrow. Story 20. The pain of learning my father had inoperable lung cancer was overwhelming. I have chronic pain, but nothing has hurt like that. Story 21. Physical pain. When I gave birth the first time, my vagina tore and needed 13 stitches. Emotional pain. Having to put my epileptic dog to sleep because the medication suddenly stopped working. She went from having 1 seizure every 2 months on the medication to 1 every 40 minutes without warning. Story 22. Inflamed pilonidal cyst. The best feeling I have ever felt is when an inflamed pilonidal cyst finally drains. Story 23. Physical pain. I would say getting my right shoulder dislocated and then popped back into place right back to back. I was tossed out of a speedboat and skipped across the water. Emotional pain. Heartbreak from realizing you love someone more than they love you. When you confront them, they don't care. Also, the heartbreak of watching my brother pass away from cancer. I will never get over the loss of my brother. I love him and miss him every day. Story 24. Being hit by my former husband. There is the pain of broken bones and bruises, and also the pain of a broken heart that does not seem to go away. Story 25. I'm going to be honest. I'm not sure. On one hand, I would say that going through alcohol withdrawal was one of the worst pains I have ever experienced, but I knew I could fix it by simply drinking some alcohol. However, the worst pain I have ever experienced was last year when I was in a motorcycle accident. I broke my pelvis, hip, and femur, fractured all the ribs on my left side, broke a bone in my neck, punctured my lung, and tore my aorta. I was in a coma for a week and spent months learning to walk again. Story 26. Septic shock. I went from being pressured to go to the emergency room to being rushed to the intensive care unit with literal organ failure. I was 18 and in my first year of college. Story 27. Childbirth was pretty terrible, but the time I had peritonitis, burst ovarian cysts, lost consciousness due to an allergic reaction, and post-surgery adhesion stands right on top. Honorable mention to anesthesia-free colonoscopy, but they gave me a lot of Valium. Story 28. Breaking up a kidney stone. It felt like someone reached into my body, squeezed and twisted my kidney, then tried to pull it out through my back and skin. It is the only time I have ever experienced pain that overwhelmed my ability to even think. Story 29. There was a clump of bamboo bushes in the yard at my old primary school. which was a good hiding spot when playing tag or hide and seek. When I was in second grade, I squatted down into the foliage, not realizing a short, snapped stalk of bamboo was right underneath. I ended up having to go to the emergency room to get stitches. Story 30. Kidney stones are extremely painful. Once you develop a kidney stone and it becomes problematic, you will forget everything except the pain. Story 31. Nerve damage to my right arm kept me up all night. The pain was so severe, it brought me to tears. Story 32. Gallbladder attack. The first time it happened to me, I was rolling all over the floor in front of my open refrigerator because I could not lessen the pain in any position and was sweating through my clothes. I went through a year of it because doctors did not believe me that something was wrong. I lost 25 pounds. Eventually, it got so bad I had to force myself to vomit to stop the attacks. The last time I had an attack, my friend found me crying because I was in so much pain and starving. They took me to the hospital. They performed an ultrasound, gave me morphine, and I was scheduled for surgery the next morning. I was walking around fine 2 hours after surgery, and my parents were upset that I might hurt myself, but I remember telling them the pain from surgery was much better than the pain from my gallbladder attacks. Story 33. For context, I am disabled. We still have no idea what caused this, and it has not happened since. We have run multiple tests but came up empty-handed. About a year ago, I was out with my mom and sister, and I sat on the ground. Then, all of a sudden, I couldn't feel my legs. I couldn't move them or feel them being touched. It was scary, and I started having a panic attack. About 5 minutes later, the feeling in my legs came back, but with it, the most excruciating pain I have ever felt. It was like someone was carving out my veins using a hot knife anytime I tried to move my legs. My sister had to carry me to the car, and I only stopped crying when I saw her on our way home. When I got home, my dad had to carry me inside, and that pain was somehow much worse. I screamed and cried for a solid 10 minutes after he put me down, then passed out. When I woke up, the pain was gone. I think the scariest part is not knowing what that was. I should have gone to the emergency room for it, but welcome to the United States, where screaming in pain is the better alternative to paying $10,000 on a medical bill. Story 34. Washing my hair when my scalp was covered in psoriasis plaques felt like someone poured gasoline on my head and lit it on fire. Story 35. Chronic pain. Not because it was the single worst incident of pain, for me that would be childbirth, but because there is no end to it. You are either in high or low pain, but never without pain. Plus, the grief of realizing that this will be the case for the next 60 or more years of your life. I am doing better now. It is well managed, and it has been about 10 years since onset and diagnosis. However, waking up in pain at 21 and never having it go away completely was very difficult. Story 36. Wisdom tooth infection. I would love to give an outside-the-box answer like grief or lost love, but my infected tooth hurt worse than any of those things. Story 37. I had sinusitis so severe that it caused half of my face to swell and affected my teeth, with pus leaking through my gums. The toothache was the most intense pain I have ever experienced. If I had not seen the doctor that day, I was planning to either commit suicide or buy heroin from a street dealer to numb the pain. This is coming from someone who was stalled at 9 centimeters dilated for 7 hours during childbirth. I would rather have 10 more babies than endure another toothache like that again. Story 38. The second time I had laser-assisted in situ keratomileusis. The first time, they cut the flaps on your corneas with a thin blade, or laser in the newer versions. The second time, they just reused the corneal flaps by pulling them down. However, for whatever reason, mine had healed much faster and more than expected. I had to keep my head still in this frame while the eye doctor tried to peel the flaps off, and I could feel my eyeball ripping slowly while he did it. By the end of both eyes, I was covered in sweat and clammy, and the doctor had to take a break because he had never had flaps that adhered that strongly before, which upset him too. I was about to pass out halfway through but managed to endure it to get it done. Story 39. My appendix burst. You think you pulled a muscle or have a stomachache, but pretty quickly it feels like the gates of hell have opened inside you. Somehow, getting a potassium intravenous drip while I was there was nearly just as bad. Story 40. The experience is a toss-up, but the lingering pain was from fractured ribs. You cannot do anything without being in pain, and just when you think it cannot get worse, you suddenly sneeze and need 5 minutes to recover. Story 41. Dry socket. I had it a few weeks ago after a tooth extraction went wrong, which probably added to the pain. Story 42. One of the cords in my testicle was constricting one of my testicles. I had to manually twist it to release the pressure. Men, just imagining that causes pain. Am I right? Story 43. I have had my appendix burst and a closed-loop bowel obstruction. Those were a mild inconvenience compared to the following experience. I needed a Jackson Pratt drain for 10 days. It was inserted just above my pelvic brim, and the tubing went deep into my abdomen to clear an abscess that had formed post-surgery. Unbeknownst to all those present at the time, the tubing had become adhered to my insides. The doctor attempted to remove it quickly, as is normally done, but it would not budge. His pull lifted my body off the bed, and I screamed from the deepest depths of my being. I made a deep, booming, guttural screaming noise as if I were being exorcised. I felt my actual soul being ripped out of me. I thought I was going to die. It felt like they were trying to pull my spine out anteriorly. It took a large amount of morphine and many hard pulls to remove the drain. I screamed the entire time. The morphine did nothing. I went into shock. I still have nightmares about it. Story 44. Giving birth. My epidural ran out before I was ready to push, and the baby was positioned, sunny side up, and got stuck under my pelvis. It felt like one of those old-century torture depictions where they flayed somebody apart by pulling their legs in 2 different directions. Story 45. Being torn from my family, my parents, siblings, extended family. I had to cut my parents out due to constant abuse, and they decided to cut me out from everyone else in the process. It is the worst pain I have ever felt, and I would not wish it on anyone. I have never suffered more than being forcibly separated from my entire family, the people I grew up with. I raised my siblings on my own, so being torn from them felt like my own children being taken away from me. It is the deepest, most awful pain. Story 46. Sciatica. I have 2 slipped discs at lumbar vertebrae 4 to 5 and lumbar 5 to sacral 1. When it flares up, it practically paralyzes me from the waist down. Take care of your back, folks. Story 47. My answer is always kidney stones. Pain is subjective for everyone. I am in my early 30s and I have labored and birthed naturally, had appendicitis, suffered from endometriosis until I had a hysterectomy, had emergency surgery for an incarcerated hernia that left me unable to walk, and undergone a multitude of other surgeries such as double carpal tunnel release, maintenance surgeries for endometriosis, and piercings in sensitive areas. But I will never forget the pain of kidney stones. Story 48. I had to get an injection every few weeks when I was receiving chemotherapy. It stimulated the production of blood cells and bone marrow. The injection itself wasn't bad, but the pain afterward was intense. I could literally feel the cells reproducing and shooting out from the base of my spine and the back of my pelvic bone. It was some of the worst pain of my life. I would find a comfortable position, and then suddenly experience severe internal pelvic bone cramping and throbbing, forcing me to adjust. Every time I moved, my bones felt creaky, with pain shooting through them, and my pelvic bone kept throbbing. It was terrible, debilitating agony, but those injections probably saved my life. Story 49. Double intrauterine device removal and insertion with no pain medication. They removed my old one and fully inserted the new one, which was already extremely painful. When they reached the last step, cutting the strings, the scissors they used were not sharp enough. Instead of cutting, they pulled the new intrauterine device halfway out. Then they had to completely redo the entire procedure. I almost gave up from the pain, but I was paying $2,000 for this session, so I continued. Now I have medical trauma. Story 50. Shingles on the left side of the face and head caused shooting nerve pains into the left eye and behind the ear. The pain was intense but only lasted 10 days. Thank goodness. Story 51. My dad was diagnosed with metastatic cancer a couple of months ago. The excruciating feeling of fear of losing him was far worse than any physical pain I have ever felt. Story 52. When I get gout in both of my feet at the same time, it triggers kidney stones. Although they are less painful now that I have experienced them many times, they are still uncomfortable. Story 53. I want to talk about my intrauterine device, but actually I woke up after my gallbladder surgery screaming. I vaguely remember seizing because of the pain. I remember just saying over and over again, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," while the nurses ran around me and tried to hold me down. All I could think of was how much pain I was in and that I did not want to hurt anyone as I flailed around. When I asked afterward, they said, "Yeah, you had a little episode," and that was all they told me. It still haunts me and no one understands. Story 54. I had to have my intrauterine device removed from the wall of my uterus because it was too late to give me pain medication. Story 55. Miscarriage with misoprostol. Home birth without medication except acetaminophen. Obstetricians and gynecologists send women home to do this regularly. It should be criminal to make women go through that kind of pain without some form of strong pain medication. Story 56. Broke a tooth right down to the nerve ending. I was banging my head against my refrigerator to try to distract from the pain. I did not sleep for an entire night, just huddled in my kitchen rocking back and forth, begging to not feel anything anymore. Tooth pain is the worst pain because it feels like it burrows into your brain and slowly kills you while you remain helpless to stop it. I had it pulled the next day, and nothing has felt better than getting that out of my head. Story 57. Severe necrotizing gallstone pancreatitis. Imagine the feeling of all your insides wanting to be on your outside. Story 58. Infected socket after having a wisdom tooth pulled. I couldn't get any assistance for 2 days apart from antibiotics because my dentist did not have weekend hours. My whole face hurt, I had a sore throat, and I could barely open my mouth without experiencing agonizing pain. I could not sleep at all for 2 days due to the throbbing pain in my face. I went to the dentist's office first thing Monday morning, and he cut it back open without even needing to numb it. I did not even feel him cut it. I felt immediate relief as I heard the sound of whatever was trapped in there getting sucked through the suction tube. Story 59. Had a tooth break and develop an abscess. It was awful, especially because they could not numb it and had to perform the root canal while I felt everything. Story 60. After the removal of 4 wisdom teeth, the medication wore off. I was writhing in agony, running all over the house looking for more medication, but I could not swallow because my throat was still numb. A grown man sobbing in pain. Story 61. Probably a tie between the cluster headaches I experienced as a teenager and some horrific pain after my intrauterine device was jostled and caused a severe reaction. Cluster headaches are pretty self-explanatory, but I am still not sure what happened with the intrauterine device. I felt it shift, experienced stabbing pain, and started to bleed so much I had to hold a roll of paper towels between my legs. After that, I was diagnosed with Asherman syndrome, which is scar tissue in the cervix, so whatever happened was quite serious. Getting intrauterine devices inserted is no picnic either, especially now that my cervix opening is narrow due to the very tender scar tissue. At least the cluster headache stopped once I got my first intrauterine device. Story 62. Having an emergency room doctor drill a hole through my pubic bone with a 1/8 inch flexible drill encased in plastic. The drill went through the pubic bone into the thorax and vena cava across my stomach lining, out through my belly, into my right inner thigh, and then out through the outer thigh. Then they stapled it to my belly. Why? We need more blood. Thanks, Dr. Acula. Story 63. Probably the endometrial biopsy and polyp scraping were done with no pain relief, all in one sitting with a bonus pap smear. Story 64. I had to get my big toenail removed because it was ingrown. The nail removal itself did not hurt. It was the anesthetic beforehand. It felt as though searing hot magma was flowing through the bloodstream in my foot. My other toe is ingrown now, so I will have to have the procedure done again. Story 65. Probably the pain was happening when part of my colon was going necrotic and dying, and my mother would not take me to the hospital because she did not want to wake up the baby. This forced me to suffer for 8 hours in intense pain with no relief. That was 10 years ago, and I still remember how terrible it was. I do not let her come to or take me to hospitals anymore. I was 16 at the time. Story 66. Recovery from a cesarean section was brutal, and so was breaking my foot. But there is emotional pain I have experienced that hurt so much I nearly died. Story 67. My best friend called me to come over when I was 18. He hung himself. He had a girlfriend and parents and chose me to find him. Took me a long time to forgive him. Grieving someone and being so irrevocably angry at them is torture. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.